The digital world, a realm where millions of young people connect, play, and form communities. Online games that bring together players from across the globe, building friendships, competing in virtual battles, and escaping into immersive worlds. But hidden within this vast digital landscape, predators were hunting. Not for treasure or points or victories. They were hunting for something far more valuable and vulnerable: children's minds. This is the story of a recruitment network that weaponized childhood innocence. A network that turned gaming platforms into radicalization pipelines, transforming teenagers into potential terrorists. And this is the story of how an elite global force discovered the nightmare before it could produce its first generation of child soldiers. It began with an anomaly that almost went unnoticed. A 16-year-old from suburban Germany was arrested at an airport attempting to board a flight to Syria. When interrogated, he revealed that he had been recruited online, not through social media, but through a popular multiplayer video game. He had been playing for months with individuals who gradually introduced extremist ideology, groomed his beliefs, and eventually convinced him to join their cause in person. Authorities treated it as an isolated incident, a troubled teenager susceptible to online manipulation. But deep within Secret Elite's counterterrorism division, an analyst recognized something others missed. This wasn't the first case. Over the previous 18 months, there had been 7 similar incidents across Europe. Young people arrested for attempting to join extremist organizations, all claiming they were recruited through online gaming platforms. 7 cases, 7 different countries, 7 different games. But the methodology was identical. The analysts dug deeper. Gaming platforms host millions of players. Voice chat allows real-time communication. Private messaging enables one-on-one contact. And crucially, most platforms have minimal content moderation for in-game conversations. It was the perfect environment for predatory recruitment. Anonymous, unmonitored, and filled with vulnerable young people seeking belonging and purpose. Secret Elite escalated the investigation to maximum priority. If the pattern was real, they were facing something unprecedented: a systematic campaign to radicalize children through the one space where parents believed their kids were safe. Phase 1 was digital infiltration. The task force created undercover accounts on the gaming platforms where previous recruitments had occurred. Operators posed as teenagers, joining games, participating in communities, and monitoring communications for signs of radicalization efforts. What they discovered was far worse than anyone anticipated. The recruitment network wasn't operating opportunistically. It was systematic, sophisticated, and structured like a military operation. The process followed a clear progression. First, recruiters identified targets, young players who showed certain characteristics: social isolation, expressions of anger or frustration, interest in military tactics or weapons, family problems, academic struggles. These were kids looking for purpose, belonging, or escape. Perfect recruitment material. Second, the groomers established relationships. They played games together, built rapport, offered friendship and understanding. They never mentioned ideology initially, just formed bonds over weeks or months. Trust was built slowly and deliberately. Third, the radicalization phase began. Subtle at first, sharing videos, discussing world events, framing conflicts in US versus them narratives. Gradually introducing extremist ideology disguised as political discussion or religious education. Testing the child's receptiveness. Reinforcing beliefs that aligned with extremist views, challenging beliefs that contradicted them. Fourth came isolation. The recruiters encouraged targets to distance themselves from family and friends who didn't understand. They created echo chambers where only extremist perspectives were validated. They made the child feel special, chosen for a higher purpose that ordinary people couldn't comprehend. Finally, the recruitment phase. Once fully radicalized, children were instructed to take action. Some were directed to conduct surveillance on potential targets. Others were taught to build simple weapons or explosives. A few were convinced to travel to conflict zones to join fighting forces. And the most concerning, some were being prepared for attacks in their home countries. The network's structure was revealed through months of digital surveillance. At the top, a coordination cell managed operations from secure locations, likely in regions controlled by extremist organizations. They designed recruitment strategies, created radicalization content, and maintained communications security. Below them, specialized teams handled specific functions. Scout teams identified gaming communities with vulnerable populations. Grooming teams built relationships with targets. Radicalization specialists introduced extremist ideology through carefully crafted narratives. And handler teams maintained contact with successfully recruited children, directing their activities and preparing them for operations. The scale was staggering. Intelligence analysis identified 143 active recruitment efforts across 12 countries. 143 children, ranging from ages 12 to 17, were in various stages of radicalization. Some were in early grooming phases. Others were fully radicalized and receiving operational instructions. And most terrifying, intelligence suggested that 26 children had progressed to planning actual attacks. The task force faced an impossible challenge. These weren't adult terrorists operating in foreign countries. These were children in suburban homes, playing video games in their bedrooms, being systematically turned into weapons by predators they had never met in person. Traditional law enforcement couldn't handle this. Arresting radicalized children would traumatize them further and might push others deeper into extremism. But allowing the recruitment to continue risked attacks that could kill dozens or hundreds. The situation demanded intervention that was both decisive and compassionate. Secret Elite designed a multi-phase operation. Phase 1 would dismantle the recruitment network, identifying and neutralizing coordinators, groomers, and handlers. Phase 2 would rescue the children, extracting them from radicalization before they could harm themselves or others. And Phase 3 would destroy the infrastructure, shutting down the platforms and methods used for recruitment. The first challenge was identifying the recruiters. They operated through encrypted platforms, used VPNs to mask locations, and employed sophisticated operational security. But every system has vulnerabilities. The task force deployed advanced digital forensics, exploited platform security, weaknesses, and traced communication patterns through multiple layers of anonymization. Over 4 months, the network structure was mapped. The coordination cell operated from a compound in a territory controlled by an extremist organization. Regional handlers were scattered across 8 countries, some in conflict zones, others embedded in Western nations as sleeper agents. Groomers numbered over 60 individuals, each managing multiple recruitment targets. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A 17-year-old who had been radicalized through the network but hadn't yet committed any crimes experienced a moment of clarity. After months of indoctrination, he saw a news report about a terrorist attack that killed children. Something broke through the ideology. He realized what he was being prepared for, and he reached out for help. Through intermediaries, he made contact with authorities and provided detailed information about his recruitment. The games where contact occurred, the accounts of his handlers, the radicalization materials shared, and most critically, the names of other teenagers he knew were being recruited. His cooperation provided real-time access to the network's operations and confirmed the intelligence Secret Elite had been gathering. With comprehensive mapping complete, the task force finalized the operational plan. Simultaneous strikes on coordination cells and handler locations, coordinated interventions with recruited children and their families, and platform-level actions to shut down recruitment infrastructure. The operation required unprecedented coordination. Law enforcement agencies across 12 countries, mental health professionals trained in de-radicalization, family counselors to support parents, digital forensics teams to preserve evidence, and most critically, operational security to prevent the network from discovering the intervention and accelerating their timelines. 0 hour was set for 0600 across all time zones, early enough to catch handlers before they could receive warning, but late enough that children would be home from school and accessible for intervention. The morning of the operation, families across Europe, North America, and Asia woke to unexpected visitors. Not armed tactical teams that would traumatize children already in fragile psychological states. Instead, child protection specialists, mental health professionals, and local law enforcement trained in sensitive interventions. The approach was careful. Parents were briefed first, explaining that their child had been targeted by a terrorist recruitment network, showing evidence of the radicalization process, and preparing them for difficult conversations ahead. Many parents were shocked. Their children seemed normal. They had no idea that while playing video games upstairs, their kids were being groomed by terrorists. Then came the interventions with the children. Not arrests, not interrogations, conversations. Mental health professionals trained in de-radicalization spoke with each child individually, assessing their level of radicalization and beginning the long process of deprogramming extremist beliefs. The responses varied. Some children were relieved. They had been coerced into beliefs they never truly accepted and were grateful for rescue. Others were resistant, fully radicalized and viewing the intervention as persecution. A few were defiant, convinced they were soldiers in a righteous cause and that their families had betrayed them. But all 143 children were removed from the recruitment pipeline in a single coordinated intervention. They were enrolled in intensive de-radicalization programs, provided mental health support, and monitored to prevent re-radicalization or self-harm. Simultaneously, strikes targeted the network's operational structure. The coordination cell's compound was raided by special forces. The 5-member leadership, who had designed and managed the global recruitment operation, were detained along with comprehensive digital archives documenting their methods, targets, and operational communications. Handler locations across 8 countries were raided in synchronized operations. 34 individuals were arrested, including both handlers operating from conflict zones and sleeper agents embedded in Western nations, who had been grooming children while maintaining cover identities as ordinary citizens. The groomer accounts on gaming platforms were systematically exposed and banned. 63 individuals who had built relationships with vulnerable children were identified through digital forensics. Some were arrested when their real identities were uncovered. Others, operating from regions beyond law enforcement reach, had their accounts terminated and their communication methods disrupted, but the operation extended beyond arrests. The task force coordinated with gaming platform companies to implement enhanced monitoring systems. Artificial intelligence tools were deployed to detect radicalization conversations in real time. Content moderation was strengthened. And, importantly, educational programs were developed to teach parents and children about online recruitment tactics. The evidence seized during the operation was extraordinary. The coordination cell's servers contained comprehensive documentation of the recruitment program, training materials for groomers, psychological manipulation techniques, radicalization curricula tailored for different age groups, and target selection criteria. They had industrialized the process of turning children into terrorists. Most disturbing were the operational plans for recruited children. Intelligence analysis of seized documents revealed that 26 children had been progressed to planning stages for actual attacks. Targets included schools, shopping centers, transportation hubs, and public events. The attacks were designed to be simple: knife attacks, vehicle ramming, or crude explosive devices. Because the goal wasn't sophisticated operations. It was using children's innocence and society's reluctance to view kids as threats to bypass security measures. Every single planned attack was prevented, not through arrests or dramatic interventions, but through the systematic dismantling of the recruitment network before any child could execute operational plans. The prosecution phase was complex. The detained network leadership and handlers faced charges in multiple jurisdictions: terrorism, child exploitation, conspiracy to commit murder, and radicalization of minors. Evidence was overwhelming. Convictions came swiftly. Sentences were measured in life terms. But what about the children? They weren't criminals. They were victims, manipulated, groomed, and psychologically abused by adults who exploited their vulnerabilities. The task force worked with governments to ensure they received treatment rather than punishment. De-radicalization programs, therapy, educational support, family counseling. The goal was rehabilitation, not incarceration. The success rate varied. Some children responded well to intervention and eventually reintegrated into normal lives. Others required years of intensive support. A few remained radicalized despite best efforts and required ongoing monitoring to prevent them from reconnecting with extremist networks. But all 143 were alive. None had committed attacks. None had traveled to conflict zones. None had become the child soldiers that the network intended to create. The financial networks that supported the operation were systematically dismantled. Though the recruitment itself required minimal monetary investment, just internet access and time. The coordination infrastructure required funding. Bank accounts were frozen. Cryptocurrency wallets seized. And the flow of money from extremist organizations to recruitment operations was disrupted. The operation's impact extended beyond the immediate network. Other extremist organizations, observing the total destruction of a recruitment program they considered innovative and secure, realized that online radicalization was no longer a safe or effective strategy. The risks of exposure and dismantlement now outweighed the benefits. Gaming platforms, shaken by the revelation that their services were being weaponized for terrorist recruitment, implemented industry-wide reforms, enhanced monitoring, improved reporting mechanisms, partnerships with counter-extremism organizations, and educational initiatives to help parents understand the risks and recognize warning signs. But the public knew minimal details. Governments released statements about disrupting terrorist recruitment networks. Media coverage mentioned arrests but omitted the full scope. The systematic targeting of children, the sophistication of the grooming process, the number of kids who were being prepared for attacks, and the global coordination required to save them. This is the burden secret elite carries. They know the names of 143 children who were hours, days, or weeks away from committing acts of terror that would have destroyed their lives and killed innocent people. They know the psychological damage that recruitment inflicted, damage that will take years to heal. They know how close society came to a nightmare scenario where children became weapons. But they also know that every one of those children is in treatment programs instead of prisons or graves. That families who could have lost children to radicalization still have them. That attacks that would have traumatized communities never occurred. The digital world continues its relentless expansion. Children still play online games, connect with friends, and explore virtual worlds. And they can do so with marginally more safety, because the most sophisticated terrorist recruitment network targeting minors was obliterated before it could produce its first generation of child attackers. This is what Secret Elite does. They protect not just lives, but innocence itself. They prevent children from being weaponized. They dismantle networks that exploit vulnerability for violence. And they operate in silence because the full truth would shatter the illusion of safety that allows childhood to exist. The operation is closed. The children are in treatment. The network is destroyed. But the mission continues, because in the vast digital landscape, other predators are searching for vulnerable minds. Other extremist organizations are developing recruitment methods. Other children are at risk, and when that threat emerges, the response will be the same. Silent, comprehensive, protective. Not on our watch, not while we breathe, not ever.